Take a breath. Look around you. When we worship outdoors, we remember something that Jesus knew incredibly well, that God's presence knows no walls. Creation itself is God's sanctuary. Everywhere we turn, grace is already here, abundant and overflowing, unearned, unmeasured, uncontained. I think that's what Jesus is inviting us to see today in our gospel lesson in this parable, that God's kingdom is like this. It's bigger and it's wider and it's freer than anything that we could build with our own hands or control ourselves. Luke brings us to a Sabbath meal in the home of a Pharisee, a place where tables mattered. Meals in Jesus' world were never about food alone. Tables were about power and about status. Where you sat revealed who you were. Where you sat revealed who you were. So imagine the scene. The candles are lit, the plates are filled with food, and everybody is watching everybody else carefully. Guests are jockeying for the best seats, the ones in the shade. People are elbowing their way to that place of honor, and Jesus is watching it all unfold quietly. And then he speaks. He says, when you're invited, don't seek the place of shade. Don't seek the place of honor. Take the lowest seat. And when you host a feast, don't invite those who can repay you. Invite the poor and the crippled, the lame and the blind. And you'll be blessed because they can't repay you. It's hard, I think, to imagine and to feel how disruptive this was in Jesus' time. This is a culture that is obsessed with honor and shame. This isn't just countercultural, it's offensive, let's be honest. Jesus is offending the Pharisee. He's offending the people that he's with. He's undoing this entire scorekeeping economy. He's saying the kingdom of God is not about climbing ladders. It's about extending the table wider and wider. Tony Campolo, author and pastor, tells of having a dinner in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. After a long day visiting mission partners, he sat down at a French restaurant, grateful for a moment of peace and a quiet meal. As the waiter set down his plate, Tony saw 4 hungry children pressing their noses against the glass, staring at his food. The waiter, sensing his discomfort, quietly lowered the shade and said, "Don't let them bother you. Enjoy your meal." I think that's what Jesus is talking about here. Jesus knows how easy it is for us to pull down the shades, to close ourselves off from the needs of others outside of our circle, to shut out the people and the problems that we'd rather not see. But Jesus is saying, lift the shades, widen the welcome, extend the table as far as you can. Richard Rohr calls this clash in the Gospel of Luke the clash between 2 economies. There's the merit economy, the one that we all know so well. It's our economy. In this economy, you earn your worth. You get what you deserve. You give when it benefits you to give. On the surface, it seems fair, doesn't it? It even works to a certain point. But here's the problem that we face as Christians. Jesus does not believe in this economy. He makes that abundantly clear. Jesus wants us to step into a different economy. It's called the gift economy of God's kingdom. And in this economy, there is no equivalence between what you give and what you receive. There's no equivalence. We're in different universes. In this economy, love is never earned. Grace is never measured, and welcome and belonging can't be bought. And if we're honest, we don't like this economy. We struggle with it. We like God's generosity. How could you not? But we like to cling to what we believe is ours. What we believe is ours. Rohr likes to remind us, though, that we really don't deserve anything. In the end, none of it belongs to us, and even what we think is ours is just on loan for a period of time. All of it is gift. Everything is a gift. To live in God's kingdom, we're invited to stop counting, to stop measuring, to stop deciding and determining who is worthy, who deserves, and who isn't deserving. Noah Ben Shea tells a story in his book, Jacob the Baker. A woman came to Jacob in tears, afraid she'd given too much bread to the poor and would now have nothing left for her own children. And Jacob listened quietly. And then he handed her a warm loaf of bread from his oven. "But Jacob," she protested, "if I take this, you will have less to sell." And Jacob smiled and he said, "The only bread that ever feeds us is the bread we give away. The only bread that ever feeds us is the bread we give away." Then he added softly, "Bread shared is never lost. It returns in ways that we don't always see." I think Jesus would have loved Jacob the Baker, because I think that's the heart of the gospel. The more that we give, the more we discover how much God has already given to us. There's really no shortcut. And as we learn to give, we learn to see the giver's hand, his generous hand in everything. The poet Hafiz captures this beautifully in a poem that he wrote. He said, "Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.' Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.'" Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. That's what Jesus is inviting us to see. Hospitality without debt. Love without measurement. Grace without end. So how do we live this out? Let me just offer 3 practices that any of us could do at any time. Practice number 1, choose the lower seat. At the Pharisees' table, guests are scrambling for the best spot, but Jesus flips it upside down. He says, when you're invited, don't seek the place of honor, take the lower seat. This isn't humiliation, it's freedom. When we stop striving for recognition, when we stop saying, pay attention to me, we discover that we're already fully known and we're already fully loved. That's freedom. That's freedom. And the lower seat is where Jesus sits, close to those that the world overlooks. So that's the first practice that you might adopt. The second is make room at your table. Wherever your table is, make room for one more. Jesus doesn't challenge us with where we sit. He challenges us with who we sit with. He says, when you host a feast, don't invite the people that can repay you. Invite the people that can't, who may not even have a home to bring you to invite you back. It's always tempting to lower the shades, to retreat into comfort, and to avoid the people and the problems that we don't want to face. But Jesus says, lift the shade. Widen your welcome. Extend the table. At God's table, there's always room for one more. Who's the one more that God is inviting you to invite to the table this week? That one more that makes you maybe a little uncomfortable, but will be your way of living out this truth, this gospel lesson. The third practice is to live as if everything is a gift. That's not hard to do, but it's important to practice. Jesus calls us to give without keeping score. This is the gift economy. Grace is not measured. Love is not earned. Belonging is not bought in this economy. But we prefer control. We love to count. We love to compare. We love to measure. We love to decide who's in and who's out. And yet Jesus keeps pointing us back to God's abundance. He's saying there's enough. There's more than enough. So when we live open-hearted and open-handed, we join Jesus in this humble feast where love is free and everybody belongs. He invites us to lift the shades, to see what God sees, to welcome who God welcomes, to live as if God's table is big enough and long enough for everyone. And when we live like this, we discover the truth that Jesus knows, that there is enough. There is more than enough for everyone. In a moment, we're going to sing about God's kingdom. But before that, I wanted to just offer a poetic reflection, an invitation to live as Christ does in Jesus and in the best of his followers. You took your place in the cheap seats, far from the host, near the neglected. You saw past the witty games, the insecurities and vanity, our anxious attempts to outshine our sisters and brothers. You, instead, saw that which shines eternal in value, and it humbled you. To follow such a lonely vision, to recline among the lost, the poor, to rest your head on the shoulders of the forgotten, and with those who could never pay back the treasures of your compassion.